All right, folks. Good morning. How's everyone feeling? All right. Welcome to day two of Data and AI Summit. So we have our one of the session today with Databricks and SAP, and for that I would welcome John, who is one of our accomplished PM in Databricks. Please give a big round of applause for him.
Okay. Thank you.
And then we have Olaf from Zalando.
They're gonna come up
after.
halfway through. Yeah, we'll give them a
All right,
warm
okay.
introduction when they're here. Awesome.
All right. Okay.
Okay, I know it's almost 8 a.m. Thanks everyone for joining us bright and early, Data and AI Summit. So, do you have the clicker?
I do.
Get the clicker. All right. So, quick reminder: there are some forward-looking statements here. Please do fill out the surveys. We'd love to hear from all of you. So I'm here to tell you about Databricks and SAP. So since you're all here at Data and AI Summit, you probably know a bit about Databricks. We don't need to introduce Databricks. And I'm guessing if you're in an SAP session here at 8 a.m. on Tuesday, you're familiar with SAP as well. So I won't give too much of an introduction, but many of you probably know we announced earlier this year a partnership between our two companies. And we're really excited about this partnership. In short, the reason we did this is because we wanted to take some of the most important business data, which our customers have, which is in SAP, and we wanted to make it easy to bring into what we think is the best data platform in the world, which is Databricks. So before we're going to talk in this presentation a lot about like why we did this. We're going to hear from one of our customers, Zalando. I want to leave lots of time for everyone here to, I'm sure you all have lots of questions, but I just want to give a sort of quick high-level overview about what actually is this partnership. What did we actually announce? So SAP, first of all, has introduced something called Business Data Cloud, or BDC, and BDC is a platform for all of your business data in SAP. So SAP, as many of you know, has a lot of applications. So there's the sort of core ERP application, which is like S/4HANA. There's SuccessFactors, Ariba, and all of these applications are producing data. And BDC, Business Data Cloud, is that platform for all of your SAP data. Now, BDC contains a number of things. One thing that's really important to understand are the data products. So data products are curated, managed data sets which are produced by SAP. And you can actually think of these as like managed pipelines that in Databricks parlance, they create like gold tables. So they're like nicely consumable, nicely usable tables that you can then use throughout BDC. Now for the Databricks side of this, there's really two things that we're doing as part of this integration. So the first one is that we have a new version of Databricks. Think of this as like an OEM version of Databricks. It's included as an application inside of BDC, and it's a managed application. So what that means is SAP, they help you run it. They control, the identity. All the data is stored in SAP managed storage, and it's really tightly integrated with BDC. And that's something that you get if you purchase BDC. And our intent there is really for folks who are new to Databricks, maybe who aren't using Databricks yet as their enterprise data platform, that's a really great place for them to get started with Databricks. Now, I'm guessing most of the folks in the audience, we'll do a quick show of hands in a minute. I'm guessing most of the folks here are using Databricks today. If you are an existing Databricks customer, our integration is also going to allow you to delta share these data products from Business Data Cloud into your existing instance of Databricks. And that's what we're going to talk a bit more about today. That's what we're going to focus on. Just really quick, so everyone knows, not to, spoiler alert, the OEM version, SAP Databricks, is actually live today. If you're an SAP Business Data Cloud customer, it's live on AWS. We're generally available. The integration, the delta sharing integration with the standalone version of Databricks coming very soon. Okay, so why do we do this? What can you actually do? Well, there's so many use cases which I'm excited to talk to you about. We're going to talk about all of these. We're going to hear from Zalando about what they're doing with SAP. But in this talk, we're actually going to focus on analytics and this idea of interacting with your data with natural language. But I think what's cool about this integration is there's just, a lot of our customers have done this work already, and there's so many amazing things they're doing. So when I talk to finance teams, they're running financial forecasts. To do that, they need not just their SAP data, but they actually need data which is in all these other systems across the enterprise. They're running planning exercises. We hear from teams that are using Databricks to help them close their books faster at the end of the month. We hear from customers who are building customer 360 tools, right? It's very common to ingest that data from your CRM, but it's much more powerful if you actually have the order history, the transactional data, which really often lives in SAP. And for folks who are building AI, the SAP data is really critical. So we've heard from manufacturing companies, mining companies that are doing predictive maintenance on their equipment. So they're actually able to predict when their equipment is going to fail. And the really key operational data frequently lives in SAP. They're able to use that data to train AI models and build these forecasts. So just talked about all these amazing things that our customers are doing. If we have this amazing partnership today, why did we need all this stuff we just announced? Well, the reality is that the majority of data in SAP actually remains untapped for AI. So let's do a quick show of hands. How many folks here are Databricks customers today using Databricks in some capacity? Okay, most people, not everyone. And then how many people have already, keep your hand up if you are bringing SAP data into Databricks? Oh, okay, actually a good amount of folks here. Okay, so how many people would recommend that? 10 out of 10, that was like a fun experience, you do it again, it was awesome. Keep your hand up. Yeah, not as many people, yeah. It's really hard. It's been really challenging to bring SAP data into Databricks, and that is what we wanted our partnership to solve. For those of you who've already done it, amazing. We're going to talk more about what you can do. Hopefully we're going to make that easier to maintain that, to keep that going. For everyone else, we want to make that easy to bring that data in. I was just at Sapphire, which is the SAP conference in Orlando. It's amazing how many teams we talk to that are SAP teams. They're like, yeah, there's this enterprise data platform we have over here, and we don't talk to them. We just live in our own world. So we want to fix that. So what are the challenges that SAP customers have? Well, there's 4 challenges. These are not necessarily specific to SAP, but I think they're really acute for our joint customers. We're going to talk about each of these, but the first one is scale, fragmentation, governance, and AI. So let's talk about each of them. So this scale is really one of the original challenges that Databricks helped solve. So the problem is that traditional warehousing solutions, costs just grow out of control. They just grow exponentially with data size. And the core problem is that if you're bundling storage and compute, as your data sizes grow, you're paying for all this compute, which you're not using most of the time. And I think most folks know this. If you're Databricks customers, this is one of the core things we've solved. With the lakehouse architecture, we've separated out the compute and storage. So it's not uncommon that I hear from an SAP customer who's like, oh, I have a warehouse with 1 terabyte or 10 terabytes of data, and that's a huge problem. Of course, at Databricks, we have customers with hundreds of terabytes, petabytes, exabytes of data, and they're able to do that because they're keeping their data in open formats and commodity storage. It's very cheap to store the data, and you pay for the compute you use. And so at Databricks, we say, may the best engine win, and of course, we think we have a very good engine as well. And so I won't talk through all these graphs in detail, but across a range of data sizes and price points, we think we have really competitive price performance. But again, the idea of the lakehouse is that we've kind of broken that cost curve by saying you can store as much data as you want, and you're paying separately for compute. So that's just a really core foundational idea for Databricks. Now, I mentioned cost. Of course, scale is a huge driver of cost, right? If you have a lot of data and you're querying it a lot, that's going to cost a lot of money. But also, cost is just driven by complexity and by fragmentation. And so again, just in general, Databricks, something we hear from customers is the data landscape is so complex. There's so many things they need to do from ingestion, data governance, machine learning. And they use a lot of different vendors for this. And very frequently, people are like, oh yeah, I have like one of every type of vendor, or many of every type of vendor. It's not uncommon to hear that. And for SAP in particular, it's very common that we hear folks have sort of a patchwork of tools and integrations just to migrate the data from SAP to Databricks. And it's just really hard to do that. So I just want to talk a little bit more detail about sort of the current state of how people are doing that migration. So SAP in general requires a license to migrate the data. So you typically need like a runtime license or something called premium map-out integration. And then people often use like a vendor to do that, and the vendors obviously have to pay the vendor itself, and like the licensing terms can change. you actually have to, even though you're paying a vendor or sometimes an SI, you still have to think about the load on your source systems, right? Because they're actually running queries on those source systems all the time, and those are business critical. So how do you make sure those don't fall over? And then there's the actual data engineering work. So you have to model that data. You have to maintain this integration. And really none of the things that I just mentioned, none of that's actually adding value to your business. All of that is just overhead that you need to do just to be able to unsilo that data, to bring that SAP data into the platform. And so what actually happens in practice when we talk to customers is that's just not worth it. They don't end up paying that overhead cost, and the SAP data stays separate. Those teams live separately. Those functions are just working in a separate environment. So how do we solve this? Well, there's a number of things we're doing. We want to take a fundamentally different approach with our partnership. And the first one is just we're trying to eliminate a lot of the complexity around licensing and vendors. So this is the golden path. This is what we recommend. We're telling everyone this is how you get your SAP data into Databricks. I'll just mention briefly because I know a lot of people ask about this. When you purchase a data product in SAP Business Data Cloud, you actually get a license to share that data into Databricks. So we're just kind of solving this problem of how the integration actually works, licensing questions, need for other vendors. The integration just works. We're responsible for that. The second thing, which I think is really important, is that SAP, through the data products, is actually taking on a lot of the complexity around modeling the data, thinking about the load on your source systems. That actually becomes SAP's responsibility with the standard data products. One thing I'll just shout out really briefly, I know a lot of folks here are probably doing some of their own data modeling in tools like BW or Datasphere today. You will actually be able to share those as custom data products as well. But we think a lot of folks, they just haven't even taken on that challenge, and the standard data products are going to solve a lot of those headaches. And then finally, I mentioned on the data engineering side, there's all these things you have to worry about, what type of CDC am I using, or is the data drifting between SAP and my analytics platform, and are there delays in the data? We actually hear from customers who say, oh yeah, I just pull the SAP data in, it's once a week, once a month. With Delta sharing, we solve all that. So I didn't talk much about Delta sharing yet, but the essence of Delta sharing is that it's zero copy sharing. So these data products are written into, again, in an open format, into SAP managed storage. And with the Delta sharing protocol, which is an open source protocol, Databricks is able to read and query that data and govern that data through Unity Catalog in a way that it just looks like it's your data, right? So it's just super easy to read it. As soon as that data product gets updated, you're able to then query that data and use that data. Okay, so I briefly touched on governance. I think we all know governance is a huge challenge. Security and privacy are under threat. There's data regulation all around the world. There's new regulations happening, every month. Cyber attacks are on the rise against companies, against data platforms. And SAP data is very often the most sensitive data in the enterprise, right? Very often it's regulated. There's some compliance standard or multiple compliance standards you have to meet. Typically contains PII. Companies typically have retention policies, so you have to keep the data for a certain amount of time, or you can't keep it past a certain time horizon. There's very complex permission models. So the application owners in these source systems are actually modeling the rules of who can use and who can access this data. So what happens when you bring that data into your analytics platform? What happens when you start to derive downstream data sets from that? What happens if you train an AI model on that data? What governs that then? So of course, as many of you know, our solution to this at Databricks is Unity Catalog. So Unity Catalog provides comprehensive governance for the lakehouse. Again, the idea of the lakehouse is that you're keeping all this data in open formats, right, in commodity storage. So you need a single view to actually manage and govern that data. And Unity Catalog, as we show here, it's not just your structured data, right? It's your unstructured data. It's the AI models. And it's way more than just access control, right? Because there's things like row-level security. We have metric views, which give you that semantic layer. You can actually see the lineage, understand what is the data model, where that data actually comes from. So UC is giving you the tools to actually govern that data and make sure it stays compliant when it comes to the analytics platform. So I did touch very briefly. I mentioned that UC helps you govern AI models. I think unless you've been under a rock, I think you're going to hear a lot of this week about the amazing progress in AI. This chart is actually a year old, but what this is just showing is that the models are getting better and better, every month, day, hour. There's a new incredible frontier model that's coming out. Even the open source models are incredible. They're so good that the benchmarks we use to measure them are getting saturated, which is pretty amazing. And some people say we may be nearing artificial general intelligence, which is a pretty incredible milestone. Except that even if you had a truly generally intelligent model, it wouldn't be very useful necessarily. And I think this customer put it really well. They said, I don't care about the standard benchmarks. I just want the model to do well and understand my data. So that's why Databricks, we care so much about data intelligence. What that means is that the AI models, they actually have to understand your business, your customers, your data. If they don't do that, they're not very useful. So this week, you're going to hear a ton about how Databricks is helping you to build AI systems that are really intelligent. And so there's a whole suite of things we're doing. I'm not going to get into too much detail, but just to quickly mention them. What do you actually need to do to help build one of these AI systems? Well, you need to make the data accessible. So obviously, you need to do all the data engineering we just talked about. You need to expose it in a way that the models can use. So maybe a vector index, feature store. You need to actually be able to train the model, right? Whether that's fine tuning or training a model from scratch. You need to be able to deploy it. You need to understand how that model is working in production. You, of course, need to govern it with Unity Catalog, as we mentioned. So there's going to be some great talks throughout the week on that. In fact, later today, I think there's a talk specifically on building AI with SAP data, I think later today. But what I actually want to talk about is that AI is really powerful for helping with analytics. And so many of you know we have our offering we call AIBI, which is Intelligent Analytics for Everyone. And we think there's really two important things that AIBI helps with. So the first is for data practitioners. And I expect most of the folks here in the room or here at the conference today, you're either a data practitioner, maybe you're managing data practitioners. Here we think AI is a really powerful tool to help you in your job. So to help you write SQL, to help you prepare the dashboards, to help you do things like manage the underlying compute, right? We don't think that practitioners should be spending time, like tuning knobs in their SQL engine, figuring out the optimal indices and things like that. AI can help you much more quickly actually provide value off of that data. So that's the top half. The second half is that we think that AI actually gives us, kind of this holy grail of actually letting non-technical folks who are not writing SQL, folks who maybe don't have a deep understanding of the data model, actually interact with that data. And our belief is that if someone's like a non-technical user, they're not just going to go to ChatGPT and ask it to write a SQL query for them. The problem, right, is that it doesn't understand the underlying data. So what we want to do is give the practitioners, that's again folks here in this room, or again folks you manage, give them the tools to be able to curate that data. It's something we have called Genie Spaces, which actually let this non-technical user talk about this data. So we're going to have some great talks this week on AIBI. You're going to hear about some great things we're doing in the keynote. But rather than hear me talk more about it, I'm very excited to welcome up our customer Zalando. So yeah, Olaf, Alejandro, please come up. Woo! Thank you guys. Awesome. So these fine folks, I can stand on this side of the podium. All right, there we go. They've actually done the hard work to bring SAP data into Databricks, and we're just going to hear more from them about how they've actually done that and what they've done. So yeah, Olaf, Alejandro, do you want to introduce yourselves quickly?
Sure. So yeah, nice to be here. Good morning. So I'm Olaf. I'm the director of Zalando Data Foundation. I'm for 12 years with Zalando, and I'm working with the team that is responsible for basically the whole data analytics foundational platform, including governance, business intelligence, etc. And I'm not really working with SAP, I also have to say this, but I'm actually the peer of my so the director of ERP, and I have witnessed and supported the work to get SAP data to Databricks in the past.
Awesome.
Great. And yeah, hello, good morning everyone. My name is Alejandro. I am Director of Engineering, Science and Product at Zalando. So I'm responsible for one of the central data owning platforms. So basically we build a lot of the data and AI on top of those central infrastructure. So we have a lot of use cases that power supply and demand for Zalando, including predicting demand, predicting supply. So a lot of relevant things that we're going to cover today, forecasting, marketing intelligence. And maybe a little bit about Zalando.
Yes.
So some of you may not know about Zalando, as we are primarily based in Europe. So we are one of the leading fashion e-commerce organizations in Europe. We have about 52 million customers, 20,000 employees, about 16 billion GMV. So we require basically this data and AI foundation to operate at that scale. And that's what we're going to be talking about today on the transactional data.
Amazing. Yeah, maybe just really briefly tell us about your journey with Databricks and then your journey of like bringing SAP data into Databricks. How did that come about?
Yeah, so when I joined Zalando, which was in 2012, so Zalando was founded in 2008 when our two founders just started shipping flip-flops from a flat in Berlin. And so the transition we have made is basically one from let's say, low scale, low complexity data landscape, where we basically just we had a transactional monolith, we had a monolithic data warehouse based on a well-known company that we don't work with anymore. But basically when we entered hyperscale, we basically saw the big need to re-architect the whole technology landscape, which meant we went to microservices that asynchronously communicate via Kafka, etc. So we just resolved all the monoliths. And then we had, of course, this big data integration challenge that came with that, because monoliths are easy in the sense of that you just have one source. When you have thousands of event streams that you actually have to integrate, you need something else. And this is where when we actually moved to introducing our data lake in 2016, which worked okay in the beginning, but then also we quickly saw we needed a partner. We found this partner in Databricks, I think in 2018. And basically since then we are somehow in the business of resolving all data silos that we can find in the company, and there's still many left.
Yes.
And one of them we are talking about today.
Yeah. Maybe let's talk a little bit more about SAP. So I think one thing we're excited to share is just for folks who've actually done this journey, what does it actually look like? Maybe you can tell us about some of the use cases you have on Databricks that involve SAP data. I know it's usually SAP data plus other data, but yeah, I'd love to hear about some of those use cases.
Yeah. So let's talk about the use cases, and I think it'd be also good to cover about like the integration learnings.
Amazing, yeah.
But indeed, so one of the flagship use cases that is also worth covering here is what we refer to internally as our autonomous forecasting system. So we basically were able to build on top of transactional data what is deep learning models that hoover a lot of kind of like insights from our market, combining also macroeconomic insights to be able to capture signal that allows us to predict demand. So we're using this at different granularities and levels, different use cases. So you can imagine things like capacity planning for our logistics, also for top line setting for our P&L, as well as many other things. And what is interesting as well is that we have started also leveraging foundation models for time series, which is actually like an emerging trend. So we have been able to just not only leverage what are those zero shot type kind of approaches, where you have a model that has not yet seen the data and is able to do pretty good, but we were able to actually like leverage them in, for example, new markets where we're expanding into, where we don't have historical data. And as we then capture that through our systems and our integrations, we can then feed it in. Yeah,
that's amazing. Yeah, Olaf, we were going to mention another use case.
Yeah, I think this is already a good list. I think so this whole forecasting space, also profit contribution. So yes. There are obviously quite a number of use cases where you just actually want to combine the financial perspective on the quantitative perspective that you have in the transactional systems. And so one of them is profit contribution. So for instance, how we steer the business. I think this is not super original, right? So we have a very strong focus on profit contributions per article, per market, on all levels, and then of course also per customer, so the customer lifetime value. And this is I'd say one of the North Star metrics we use in the company, and that of course always requires actually combining the financial perspective with the transactional perspective. And so this is one of the very important.
I think you were telling me you had this great anecdote about you have some system that understands how many units were sold, and another that understands the price. So without understanding sort of the units and the price, it's actually hard to have that view.
Yeah, exactly. And so this is a constant exchange, basically.
Yeah.
So for instance, imagine we have 13 different fulfillment centers across Europe, and of course items constantly move. So there's of course so we predict in which market actually this item is going to be sold next. So it moves. It's on a truck. It's somewhere. At the same time, we of course want to know actually what is the value of that item that is currently sitting on that truck. And so this is where an example of where these two sides have to come together.
It's funny, as we were preparing, I think we were talking about some of the use cases for SAP data. I think one of you mentioned like there's almost no use case for SAP data that doesn't involve integrating it with some other data in the platform. Pretty much all these use cases are about bringing the data together, which is amazing. So yeah, you were starting to say, maybe let's hear more about that journey to get that SAP data integrated. What did that look like? What are some of the challenges you had to overcome to do that?
Yeah, I think this was always like people's so individual pipeline building, right? So starting from when you go, so what. This is not first-hand knowledge, but this is also my understanding is actually what you have originally at SAP HANA is tables that are really, really hard to understand with some cryptic names and so you actually need people with a deep understanding of actually how SAP works internally, with a deep understanding of the technicalities of the contents, and then also of the data formats that are used on the platform. So basically you need so a very
Does
very
that person
special
exist that has all this?
So we try to have these people, but it's of course it's a long journey, right? And people have done this, and I think this has been super successful. But it's a very, very special profile. You need people who are deep into SAP, deep into the contents, but also deep into Databricks and modern data stacks. And so right, that's just hard. And this is what I think is changing. Yeah.
I think one thing that's interesting is you two have slightly different roles, and you mentioned that you all have a counterpart who works in the ERP systems. We talked to at Sapphire, and I guess I'd love to hear more about like how do your teams work together, and how do you make sure you don't end up with those silos and end up with how do you have good collaboration across these different kinds of teams?
Yeah, I think that this is so important because basically this case wouldn't have been possible if we wouldn't be working very closely. So we are actually we are sitting very close, even physically when we are in the office, and it's let's say one of the strategically one of the big goals that we have to actually break down silos not only in technologies but actually in the community, in the organization. And so traditionally, of course, this is a very different profile with very different skills, etc. But we also seen that there's quite a lot of interest, especially so the SAP ERP engineers are actually very interested in learning about modern data technologies. So this is also something that is great. And if you give them the opportunity, there's a lot of willingness to actually go there. But it's a long journey. It's not.
Yeah, and I would say also that is something that maybe for the folk in this room is maybe an important takeaway. So as we develop kind of like this capability, I mean, at Zalando, yes, we have a data platform, data foundation. We have a lot of kind of data mesh use cases of data where we're extracting value, but we are not at the end, right? Like if anything, we're still at the early parts of the journey. And I think this partnership between, central functions and let's call it like business specific, functions, is super critical, right? Especially when it comes to lift and shift initiatives, like integration with SAP, but also more generally with migrations. I mean, we all know kind of like the pains of multi-year migrations and how to achieve that. I think the partnership of building those bridges through, I mean, at Zalando is more like steercos, global initiatives, global projects, I think we call them, helps a lot kind of like push that. But it doesn't remove some of the gaps that we still see, like for example, the fact that the pipelines would be specific to those particular data sets as opposed to having kind of access to everything.
Yeah. So I think for a lot of folks here it sounds like there are a lot of folks who've done that integration with SAP and Databricks, but maybe for folks who are getting started, is there any advice you have if you could go back, and especially in light of some of the announcements, the partnership that we've talked about today?
Yeah, okay, so looking back, I would say the crucial part is just really to get all these perspectives in. You need the functional perspective, you need the technical perspectives of both systems actually, and also an understanding of how data platforms work in general, also from a functional point of view, with a view on the ultimate customer that you have there. And I think with the announcement. So what I find exciting about that is just that it's not only removing effort in actually having to build a pipeline, but rather it's just having it sitting there. So in case there is a new, if Alejandro and his team have a new use case for actually building some new forecast model, they don't have to ask engineers from multiple departments now to build a pipeline, but it's just there. And I think that's actually what's driving, or what will be driving innovation, I believe. Yeah.
All right, so last question. What's on your wish list? Is there something you wish we had announced in the partnership, maybe we haven't announced yet, that we should go do?
Yeah, so we were chatting about that just now. So I think in a world where obviously there is this data available through magic, right? Like we just have it accessible. Yeah. One of the trends that actually we were mentioning, I was mentioning that is emerging right now, is foundation models that go beyond just what we are kind of seeing today, which is text, image, audio. So this is foundation models for transactional data, things like time series, things like tabular data. And right now we're actually seeing a trend of what is referred to as tabular foundation models. So basically these are models that are built maybe on graph neural network architectures that plug into your databases, into your relational databases, and just hoover up basically your data to be able to capture signal and be able to make kind of like insights, predictive insights on something, right? So the value of having that data available is not only that like business teams are able to create new models on top of this data, like new forecasts, but even one step beyond, we would be able to actually extract insights across the data that is available, right? So then we can maybe identify things that perhaps we wouldn't know that we could capture value from, right? So I think that would be where the, I guess, golden nugget would be. And from our side, this is the opportunity that could actually, push to the next level as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah, one thing that I also find very, very, very attractive about the announcement is the role that data products play, and so that we move away from just the technical data structures that are idiosyncratically existing in the different systems, but rather it's something that is actually useful beyond that scope. And maybe to wish ambitiously, I would hope to see more of these, right? So into other enterprise platforms as well. And this thinking of actually saying, so we have data products, we have information that is not only for our own system, but rather that is actually for the enterprise, and that is useful and well documented.
Makes sense. Yeah. Cool. All right, Olaf, Alejandro, thanks so much for joining us today. Thanks. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, just going to really quickly wrap up here. So just to recap again, SAP Databricks, which is this OEM version of Databricks, bundled version, it's included in Business Data Cloud. If you have BDC, you can use this today. It is generally available on AWS. We are bringing the GCP and Azure versions very, very soon. And very soon we will have the native Delta sharing integration with your existing Databricks coming later this year. So stay tuned. Very excited to have that in everyone's hands. Quick shout out, please do. We have a bunch of sessions this week about our SAP and Databricks partnership. You're going to be hearing a lot about it, so please do check out some of the other sessions. We're going to talk about AI, go really deep on actually Delta sharing technology itself. So encourage folks to check those out.